Today, $18.8 trillion in interstate trade is conducted annually by freight trucks alone in the United States. Given this massive scale, there must be laws in place to govern those many transactions. A complex collection of interstate commerce laws have served as the backbone to this kind of trade in the United States for centuries. But how do these regulations work, and what is the role of the federal government in comparison with state and local governments?
To answer these questions, we must observe the decisions made at the Constitutional Convention held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1787, where the Constitution was drafted. Before the writing of the U.S. Constitution, the United States was mainly governed individually by the 13 colonies due to the lack of power granted to the national government under the Articles of Confederation, the first Constitution of the United States. This brought about a slew of economic problems. In particular, the Founding Fathers were tasked with increasing the power of the federal government to regulate interstate and foreign trade. Their solution to that issue has had a greater impact on business than any other provision in the Constitution.
Found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it was dubbed the Commerce Clause. It states that U.S. Congress is granted the power to regulate commerce among the states and with foreign nations and Native American tribes. Ultimately, its core purpose over the years has been to federally control interstate trading. That said, the Commerce Clause initially only covered commerce between the states and not commerce within a single state. This changed in 1824 upon a ruling on Gibbons versus Ogden. In the process of resolving the court case, Chief Justice John Marshall created the Dormant Commerce Clause doctrine. Still used today, the Dormant Commerce Clause doctrine prevents individual states from passing laws that cause unfair rules on interstate commerce. The rule follows that intrastate commerce can be regulated by the federal government if it is substantially affects businesses involving more than one state.
Since the conception of the Commerce Clause, there have been many landmark cases regarding interstate commerce that set the stage for how it is governed today, including Wickard versus Filburn, Heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States, and the aforementioned Gibbons versus Ogden. That said, we have found that another case, which revolves around liquor, state laws, and the Commerce Clause, best exemplifies the current state of the interstate commerce law. The case is called Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailers Association versus Thomas. This case was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2019. A petition was filed with the Supreme Court on July 20th, 2018, and the final ruling was issued on June 26, 2019. The case answers this big question. Can a state stop someone from another state from opening a business just because they don't live there?
The case was between Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailers Association, that's a group that represents liquor store owners in Tennessee, and Tennessee's Alcoholic Beverage Commission, specifically a man named Clayton Bird, who was the executive director at the time. He was in charge of approving or denying liquor licenses. A man named Doug Ketchum and his family moved to Tennessee to buy a liquor store in Memphis. They applied for a license through a company called Total Wine and More, which is a national chain. The problem was, neither Ketchum nor Total Wine had lived in Tennessee long enough to meet the state's 2-year residency requirement. The Retailers Association didn't like that. They wanted to stop out-of-state businesses from getting into the Tennessee liquor market, so they sued to block the licenses. That's how the case ended up going all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The Commerce Clause is part of the U.S. Constitution. It gives Congress the power to regulate business, or commerce, between the states. But over time, the courts have said it also means that states can't pass laws that unfairly hurt or block businesses from other states. Even if Congress isn't doing anything, states still aren't allowed to make trade between states harder. So when Tennessee has a rule that states you must live there for 2 years before you can sell alcohol, the argument was that they were making it harder for people from other states to compete, and that violates the Commerce Clause.
But Tennessee had a response. They said the 21st Amendment gives states the power to regulate alcohol, and they get to decide how liquor is sold in their state, including who can sell it. They claimed the residency requirement was about protecting public health and safety. making sure liquor stores were run responsibly and not just by some out-of-state corporation who didn't care about the local community. So the real conflict was between two parts of the Constitution: the Commerce Clause, which tries to keep trade between states fair and open, and the 21st Amendment, which gives states some power over alcohol. So what did the Supreme Court say? In 2019, the court ruled against Tennessee. They said the residency law was unconstitutional because it discriminated against out-of-state business owners. The court agreed that states have some power to regulate alcohol under the 21st Amendment, but not in a way that violates the Commerce Clause. They said the 2-year residency rule wasn't really about health or safety. It was more about protecting in-state businesses from competition, and that is not allowed.
So Doug Ketchum, the guy who wanted to run the liquor store, won the case. He was allowed to get the license, even though he hadn't lived in Tennessee for 2 years, and the state had to stop using that law.
The big takeaway is this: the Commerce Clause doesn't let states treat out-of-state businesses unfairly, even when it comes to things like alcohol. States can make rules, but they can't block people just because they're from somewhere else.
And even though the 21st Amendment gives states power over alcohol, the power has limits, especially when it starts looking more like protectionism than public safety.
In conclusion, the Tennessee Wine and Spirits case serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing balance between state authority and federal oversight in the realm of interstate commerce in the United States. It illustrates how the Commerce Clause continues to protect the free flow of trade across state lines, even as states retain certain powers under the Constitution. As commerce grows ever more interconnected, these legal principles remain essential in ensuring fairness, competition, and consistency across the United States.